What's up? Welcome to Trackletics Live, the ultimate show for all things track and field. Join us as we dive deep into the sport, interviewing track and field athletes, coaches, nutrition specialists, and more. Get ready to hear some dope conversations and gain exclusive insight into what it takes to become a top performer in the sport. Whether you're a seasoned track and field athlete or just starting off, this is the show for you. So make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Let's get into the show. So let me just take a second, have you introduce yourself, name, where you coming from, and then, we'll get into it. I got some great questions for you. I know our audience is going to love this conversation.
I'm really looking forward to it. Usually I'm the one interviewing people, so I'm excited to be on the other side, and I can kind of just sit back and just enjoy the process. So for everyone watching, my name is Cesar. I'm creator of the Sprint Project as well as the Sprint Club. I'm originally based out of New York City. My family is from Mexico, so I'm Latino American, first generation in the USA, and I'm really looking forward to being part of this call.
Dope, man. Well, thank you for taking a second out of your day to actually sit down and have this conversation with me. I'm coming straight out of Compton. You're way in New York, so we on different time zones. So I really do appreciate you, setting this time out. But let's go ahead and get into it, So my first question, one that I love to ask everybody is, what is your track story? How did you get into track? How did you, start this whole Sprint Club? Because you guys have a huge YouTube channel, thousands of followers, tons of content, great educational videos on there. So how did you get into all of this?
So my way of getting into track is a very unorthodox. It's going to be very different than probably most people's story, because I actually came into it from a coaching background. Originally, I was already based in New York City. I already had my personal training business. So I was working with individuals mainly on just general fat loss, muscle building. And one of my clients, he asked me to add in sprinting into his routine. And I said, all right, let's do it. But I'll be honest with you, I don't come from a track background, because I went to school in the middle of Manhattan, and it was a small school and nothing fancy. We don't have no track, and I don't have that background. So I said, okay, I'll start researching. He said, cool, no problem. We'll figure it out, and we'll just take it from there. So I started researching, started looking up things online, on YouTube. And everywhere that I looked, for some reason, I just wasn't finding content that made it easy to understand for me. I wasn't finding something that was like making it fun and exciting. Everything was like, all the best information was either just articles here and there, maybe like textbook, research papers here and there, and a couple of videos on YouTube, but nothing that I was like, okay, this is the go-to place where I can learn from. So initially I was a bit disappointed, but out of that initial disappointment and frustration, that led to me just saying, okay, if it doesn't exist already, then why don't I just create it? Because there's probably somebody else just like me who's looking for this information, who might not have all the expertise, who might not have the best coaching, who might not have the best background, but wants to get involved. They were interested in sprinting. And I just started posting videos online. I just started posting videos on YouTube, sharing what I was learning, sharing what I was experimenting with myself, with my clients. And through that process, the first video that I posted on YouTube, Sprinting Benefits, it landed at #1 at search. So people that were searching for benefits of sprinting, my video came up, and that was my first video ever. I had no idea what I was doing. I was recording on a friend's camera. I had a GoPro using as a microphone. I was completely lost with video production. So that's pretty much how I just started doing it. But just video by video, they started growing. But the thing is, I actually took a break in the beginning, because since I was training, I was working, I was hustling, like I didn't have time to just focus all in on content creation, especially YouTube, which is a long process. So instead I said, okay, maybe later on I'll do it, but for now I gotta work, I gotta make money. So that's what I focused on. But pandemic hit, and next thing you know, I'm back on YouTube. I pick up a camera and I start learning, I start sharing, I start putting out stuff. And immediately people are really loving it, because the way I approach things is from a very science-based background. Because I come into it with all respect, I'm not gonna assume that I know everything, and I'm not gonna just talk from my experience. Like if I know what I'm talking about, I'm gonna look at the science, I'm gonna look at the experts, I'm gonna speak with the coaches, I'm gonna walk up to the track coaches that I see outside, and I'm asked them, okay, what's the sauce? What information can you give me? And I started piecing things together. And one of my biggest videos that is still, I think, my biggest video right now is 6 exercises to make you faster. And in there, every video, every exercise is science based. I tell you, okay, do this for this many reps, for this many sets, because in this article, they tell you this will benefit you in this part of your sprint. So that's kind of how I got into it. I just started just experimenting, researching, and fast forward to today. Right now, we have the Sprint Project, which is my educational platform where I share things through YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and then we have the Sprint Club, where we have right now over 400 members, close to 500 inside, who we have everything from rugby athletes, ultimate frisbee, track athletes, soccer, American football, everyone that wants to get faster. The cool thing there is that we're actually using artificial intelligence in order to analyze their mechanics, analyze their videos. Everything that we do is science-based, so we're using video detection software. I could be in New York, and someone that's inside the Sprint Club from, let's say, Australia or Ireland or Dubai can send in their video, and we will analyze it using motion detection software and artificial intelligence to analyze everything down to their stride length, air time, ground contact time, and really find out exactly what they have to do and then prescribe them science-based exercises. So that's a Sprint Club. And then the other thing that we have is Sprint cheat codes. So if you're not ready for coaching yet, if you're not ready to be part of Sprint Club, if you're still just kind of getting your feet wet, or you just need to work on your mechanics, that's the Sprint cheat codes, where we teach you step by step our process of diagnosing your weak points, breaking down your mechanics, and prescribing science-based exercises all on your own. And the Sprint cheat codes, Sprint Club, Sprint Project is all born out of just my curiosity for sprinting, because I believe it's the most powerful form of exercise in the entire world. No matter what you look at, there's nothing that's going to bring your body to full exhaustion, exhaust all your muscles the way sprinting will in a matter of just split seconds. The only thing that comes close is a pool, but the benefit of sprinting is you don't need any equipment, just your feet and a surface. So that's why I love sprinting, and that's why, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Wow, that is amazing. You literally was searching for some information, trying to learn, and you realize that there's no platform out there. So that inspired you to actually create your own. And I actually came across those 6 exercises. So that's why I was like, whoa, this page is amazing, and you take the science, you're very science-based, but you make it very digestible. It's very simple, like I said, there's some videos that I've been sending to, my teammates. We talking about it, practicing some of your cheat codes, stuff like that, because having another perspective, break it down, in a simpler way, an easy way to digest it is helping us too, so you way in New York and you don't even realize how you've affected me or some of my teammates as well, so that's major. But let's go back a second. So you have the Sprint Project, you have the Sprint Club, right? And you said in the Sprint Club, you're basically helping teach athletes
Correct.
to get faster, right? Because that's major. I had this joke with my friend, like, land sports are the only sports that don't take the time to actually learn how to run, right? If you're in a swimming sport, you have to, the first step would be to learn how to swim. If you're playing water polo or swimming, you can't be in the water if you don't know how to swim. But if you're a football player, rugby player, basketball, track, we don't take the time to actually learn how to run effectively, or efficiently. And so the platform that you've created with the Sprint Club is major. 400 athletes in there. That is amazing, man. And you're using AI, motion detective software, so that it's not like a biased perspective. It's actually, we actually get to see the details and how it's affecting their run, their stride rate, the stride frequency, stuff like that. So that's major. But let's go on a little more detail about that Sprint Club. That is your, like your private club that people,
Yeah, exactly.
enroll or enlist
So
in, right?
a little bit more about the Sprint Club. Essentially, what it is it's a private membership where we have different tiers depending on what you need. So inside there, we can pretty much just give you access to the chats, So you can just connect with other people, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe in other parts of the world. Then there's the silver level, where that way you get group coaching. And then here's where you would access programs. Then you would access training. Then you would get on coaching calls with us, where we would pretty much take you step by step on exactly what you have to focus on. So then we have, after that, we have the gold membership, which essentially is one-to-one coaching. Now here's where if you need even more attention, then you can pretty much get the gold membership, and then we pretty much create a customized program for you. We do 4 video analysis per month for you, and you have constant access to myself. And regardless of what membership level you're at, currently right now, everyone that's inside gets access to our monthly workshop. So every single month in there, we have a call with an expert, whether that be a physical therapist that works with elite athletes, or we have Olympians. Just today, just half an hour ago, we just finished up one of our calls, and we had a 2-time Olympian who works with pro athletes right now. He's retired, but he works with pro athletes. He himself competes as a masters athlete. He holds a world record at his age at 59 years old. So he's still competing himself as a masters athlete. And he was just in there all day giving us the sauce, because there's stuff that these guys, like, you might have experienced this too. Like, there's things that some coaches, some athletes might not want to share online, because some of the stuff is just so valuable. And when you're trying to improve by 1/10 of a second, 100th of a second, it's all about the details. So there might be one little movement or one little thing that a person in that camp might not want to share with you, because they know that if you implement that one thing and you shave off a fraction, a split, just a tiny bit off your ground contact time, that multiplies by 44, that multiplies by how many ever steps you're taking, and it can have a huge impact on your speed. So the Spring Club is essentially our private membership. We have different tiers depending on what people need. We have actually a free level. We have a silver level, which is a more affordable option. And then we have the gold level, which is more hands-on. So the goal of this is essentially to provide what most people can't access right now, which is expert level science-based coaching at an affordable price, depending on what different people want, depending on what you can afford. Because the thing is, even if you're on one of the best track teams in the world, usually you're going to be doing the program of the fastest guy in the team, because the coach is going to program for the fastest guy. He's going to program for the best guys on the team. And you might not get that hands-on analysis. You might not get that hands-on approach all the time. You might not get all that attention. So through the Spring Club, through the power of artificial intelligence, through the video detection software, through the power of the video creation, we're able to automate and systematize a lot of things that would normally take up a lot of time, but we're able to do so in a way to make all this information accessible to a lot of people and provide a detailed level of coaching without breaking the bank, at a price that's affordable and accommodating to what the individual needs. And it's all hosted inside of our private app. We have an app where we have group chats. And directly inside, we have the coaching calls. Inside there, we have the workout programs. Inside there, we have the exercise videos. So it's all hosted in one place, because sometimes the problem with, having a club or having an organization is, got too many apps, man. Like, you got to go here, Facebook group here, Zoom link here, WhatsApp or Slack for this and that. So we try to keep everything simple. Like, my whole philosophy is not only just information made digestible, but also just simplifying everything as much as possible. So we got everything all in one place, from the chats to coaching calls, programs, workouts, everything all in one location inside the Spring Club, hosted all in one single app.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I've been a part of some groups. Like you said, we got a group in WhatsApp, we got a secret Facebook group, and we got a Zoom link for the call, and it's all over. So for you to centralize all of that and put it into one platform, that's amazing. And one thing that you said, that the personalization of the programming, the science back to it. I would like to say that I have an amazing coach. I train with the Sharks. We train at Mount Sac College. Mount Sac is winning state damn near every year. My coach is amazing. He knows his stuff. But like you said, coaches do program for the fastest athletes. And me, myself, I've been able to actually coach high school. And when I started, I was like, nah, I'm not going to program for the fastest athlete, but you kind of have to, That way that those faster athletes are not, getting slower. They're actually continuing to improve. And that actually does help some of the slower ones get faster. But we all still have, personal things that we need to work on, right? So for example, for me, my left side has been lacking a little bit, so I've been looking up like exercises to build strength on my left calf, my left glute, rebuild the strength in my left hamstring. Those aren't things that my coach can give me one-on-one, like hands-on time, and just give me a personalized program. That would be so much of his time, and there's at least 20 of, the Sharks athletes out there. That would be way too much time for him to give everybody a one-on-one session and figure out what you just need to do, So we do have a solid sprint program that's been able to help a lot of us, but every athlete around the world still has personal problems or personal things that they need to improve. So it's very important that, you've created that platform to be able to help people, right? Because I can still train with my coach and still be in your sprint club and figure out those small things that I need to work on. And that would actually help my coach, so that he doesn't have to spend that time. He can continue to see me improve and continue to, push the program further, so that's major. Now about that YouTube channel, you have thousands of followers. You're giving out tons of game, especially on your Sprint Club page too. So make sure you guys take a second to go follow him. I promise you're gonna love the content. It's very detailed. It's very simple. It's digestible. It's something that you can actually watch the video and be at the track and implement it right now and feel the change. Feel yourself, get further down the track, produce more force, cover more ground, So it's major that you've actually been able to do that. That top video, like you said, those 6 exercises based on science. What would you say is that the number one exercise or something that we can give people, something that they can take away to improve their sprint game?
I'm glad we're getting to that aspect because I know people also want to know the exercises. I know the science is cool, but we want to know exercises. So right now, I'll give you guys one example. And that it's actually not even in the video because this is something that's more new and that I've been looking into more recently right now. And that's going to be, for some people, it might not be new, but if you guys aren't doing this already, it's going to be doing quarter squats, making sure you're doing quarter squats with maximum speed because I'll demonstrate this for you right here. So if we look at sprinting, and now I'm not saying not to do full ass to grass or full depth squats, but what I'm saying is that a large majority of our squats, we want to do them in a quarter squat. So you might just go down to about right here and you pop back up. And the reason for that is when we're sprinting and you pick up your leg and you strike the ground, you're mostly in a standing position when you're upright. The position when you're in your acceleration, when you're right here, this is only for a few steps. It's only for a few steps in the acceleration. So if we look at science and literature, there's plenty of science, and the guys who train with the best coaches, they already know this, that the type of squatting that's going to transfer the best to sprinting is going to be quarter squats because the movement is so similar to upright sprinting. And if we look at the data and the science, for example, a 100-meter sprint is typically won through top speed and maintain top speed. And how do we achieve a high top speed? A lot of it comes down to putting more forces into the ground. Something else that we talk about a lot. But this exercise is a practical thing that you can do to improve your vertical forces, because when you're doing this quarter squat position, it's very similar to upright sprinting, and you're able to train actually with heavier weights so you can overload the muscle to create adaptations so that when you're on the upright sprinting phase, you can produce more force. And that's one exercise that I think all athletes should have in their workout program, especially as we're getting closer to actually competing. When you're earlier in the season, you might have more heavy, deeper squats. But once you're actually in competition, you want your movements to mimic more of what your actual sprinting would look like. And a quarter squat done with heavy or medium to light weights, rapidly fast, for high repetitions is one exercise that's going to transfer over directly and benefit you when it comes to upright sprinting. So that's one movement that I can give you right now. There's a whole bunch of them that we have on our page, but I think for anyone that's not doing that yet, or that's maybe has heard about it but isn't a big believer in it, just remember when you're sprinting, majority of your sprinting you're upright, and when you're doing a quarter squat, the position is very similar to when you're upright sprinting. So that's going to allow you to transfer over that force. And if we even look at the law of specificity, which according to science means the more similar the movement is to your actual performance of your event, the more it's going to transfer over. So if you look at a lot of the fastest guys, if you look at, let's say, Marcel Jacobs, if you look at Coleman, if you look at Usain Bolt, you'll see a lot of times when they do squats, and even if you look at other sports, sometimes people that don't know too much, they'll comment and say, oh, no, he's not going down low. But they don't know the science behind this. They don't know that these guys are actually a step ahead. They're actually doing something that some people, general population, might not be aware of, which is quarter squatting, and quarter squatting will transfer them over to upright sprinting. That's one movement that I could definitely recommend everyone to test out and have in their program for sure.
Nah, that makes complete sense, because you can go to YouTube and search Usain Bolt workout and you will see him quarter squatting, right? And I'm watching the video trying to figure out why is this guy quarter squatting, but it makes sense because it's a a similar position to how we're running, right? So it will translate over. And even going all the way back to Ben Johnson, there's videos of him super heavy quarter squatting. He swore by squatting, like that was the exercise, quarter squats, and he would load it up. So that makes perfect sense. Okay. Now in that sprint group, or the sprint club, you guys just had a call today. Can you give me a little insight on, what happened in that call, some of the things that you guys talked about, so that, I know our audience that is tuning in right now, and even the audience that'll tune in, as this video is posted, they'll definitely benefit off that sprint club.
Appreciate
so like, what's
that,
in
man.
it? What happened today?
The thing we had today is we had our monthly workshop with Wendell Dickinson. He's an Olympian. He works with pro athletes. And essentially what we do on these calls is, in the beginning, I'll give the science out. I'll lay out, all right, here's the science behind this training method. And specifically, we talked about velocity-based training, similar to kind of I'm talking about right now, training barbell movements at fast velocities, because those fast velocities are going to transfer more over to sprinting, especially once you're in competition phase. So we specifically in the beginning, I went over the science. I talked about different literature. I talked about how athletes can implement it without expensive equipment, because normally to do velocity-based training, they use a tracker. They put a tracker on the barbell and they can measure the bar speed. But there's apps such as My Jump Lab Pro. This was developed by a PhD researcher who specializes in high performance, and it's called My Jump Lab Pro. They have a free trial, so I'm not really pitching it. Like, I don't get anything from it, but it's something that can be used to actually measure the velocity of the barbell. And we talked about the science, and then after that, we transitioned over into letting Wendell Dickinson, our main expert for today, pretty much give over certain exercises that he's used in the past for himself, for his athletes. And in the call, what's actually interesting is that because we're doing video, we're able to pretty much put the camera down, and just like how I showed you, he had a whole setup. Like, he had a whole in his house, a whole setup of equipment. He even had some starting blocks in the background, and he was showing us a ton of exercises. Some of stuff I've never seen before either. And there's some stuff in there that he said that he normally won't even share publicly, because there's just certain things that is just, I guess, like so useful that he doesn't want to give it out to somebody else, because when you're at the elite level, one thing could be the difference between you losing or you winning. So there's different exercises that he showed us. There's one that I can talk about. That's one that I actually was talking about today, and specifically one topic that came up a lot was strengthening the hip flexors, because we talked a lot about squatting. We talked a lot about cleans, Olympic lifts, and a lot of stuff that's related to the quad, hamstrings, glutes. But sometimes the hip flexors aren't talked about enough. And if they are, people are talking about strengthening the hip flexors only in the shortened position. So I'll show you what
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was definitely gonna ask about that. I've seen a lot of videos
yeah,
on Instagram of people sitting down, trying to strengthening their hip flexors, but you don't run sitting down. So how would
exactly.
that translate over to sprinting? So what would be a better way to
Exactly.
strengthen
So that's the
your hip
problem that
flexors?
people talk about shrinking the hip flexors. So you might have seen like those movements, for example, they might be on the ground. They might be on the ground. They might put like something right here, and they might just do this, stuff like that.
Yeah,
But the thing is, we don't run like that. So that doesn't transfer over the best because if you're only training, this part, you're only training half of the sprint. The sprint is all the way over here. We need all of this movement. So one thing that we were talking about, and we actually talked about this one time before with another expert who's a physical therapist that actually his team worked with Johan Blake because Johan Blake was having also issues with his hip flexors and his hamstrings. And one thing that's super important is to make sure that you train your hip flexors in a lengthening position. So when you're sprinting, your hip flexors might get all the way up here when you're sprinting. So you want to make sure that you train the hip flexors all the way in this position, the lengthened position. Because when you're sprinting and you're exposing your hip flexors to maximum length, maximum forces, and maximum speed, if they're not trained and prepared to handle these forces in these violent movements, what's going to happen is then we're going to have hip issues. You might even injure your hip joints. In some cases, something that happens at the hip might cause an issue with the hamstring because we need to make sure that everything is strengthened evenly. If this isn't doing its work, this has to work harder, and then something right here can get pulled or strained because there's not balance. You know what I'm saying? If this is not evenly balanced, we can have an issue. So one simple thing that athletes can do is doing Bulgarian split squat. So let's say you load up right here, and you have the barbell or you have some dumbbells. So you come down real low, and you see what's going on right here. This whole area right here is lengthened.
yeah.
This whole area, your quad and your hip flexor is lengthened under forces, and you come right back up. But what you want to do, according to science, the most effective way to actually strengthen muscles is in the eccentric phase when you're lowering. Yeah, now when you're going back up, people think it's going up and contracting, but it's actually in the eccentric portion. So we want to spend time when the hip flexor is lengthened, and we want to spend more time under tension in the eccentric phase. So what does that look like? That means, as an example, you do your Bulgarian split squats, or however you want to call them. Put the foot back, put the foot on an elevated surface, whether you have dumbbells or barbells, and you come down right here slowly. Take your 5 seconds, come down here, and this whole area is being lengthened and loaded and stressed eccentrically in a position that's going to transfer over to sprinting. Because when you're sprinting, like we mentioned earlier, your hip flexors are being lengthened violently. So anyone that's ever had hip issues, something that I would definitely incorporate is that movement. Eccentric Bulgarian squats.
That's huge. Right. And I love that you keep, hitting the nail on the head for the eccentric part because running is not concentric, right? It's not the gym strength of you concentrically running down the track. Concentric movement is a muscle contraction. That's not what it is, It is a violent, powerful, forceful movement. And so it's not concentric. And so all of the concentric exercise that we're doing doesn't necessarily translate over. It's great for strength, right? General strength, muscle building, stuff like that. But yeah, it is important that you actually train in those eccentric portions, the hip flexors, hamstrings, stuff like you were saying, especially hamstrings.
Definitely, yeah.
Hamstrings should be trained
Hamstrings
eccentrically,
is
right?
definitely a popular one. That one is one that people talk about a lot already. So I think now we're coming out with a lot of good information around training the hamstrings, and there's a lot of science that shows that if you train your hamstrings eccentrically, then you're going to be able to prevent a lot of injuries. And you can do this through different movements. One of the most popular ones right now that people are talking about a lot on social media is the Nordic curls. Now that become really popular. Another option that's also scientifically backed up is lying eccentric hamstring curls. So you lie on your stomach and you curl the weight up and you come down real slow. Those eccentric movements are going to prevent injury when it comes to your hamstrings. And if you want to know why, I could just show you real simply. If
Show
when
me.
you're
Let's see.
sprinting, especially at maximum effort, what's going on right here? When you after you recover the leg and you're about to strike, you're lengthening right here. You're lengthening, and the foot is coming back down. Let me see if I can get a better angle. You're lengthening, and your foot's coming back down. So right there, when this is happening, your hamstrings are eccentrically, or in other words, they are loading as they're lengthening, and they're loading as they're lengthening violently to strike the ground. And the faster you're running, the more violently they're being stressed in that lengthened position. So by doing eccentric hamstring movements, we are able to prepare the hamstrings to handle those forces as they're lengthening. And that movement is very similar to when you're doing Nordic curls, to when you're doing eccentric hamstring curls. Those are the movements that are going to keep you healthy, injury-free. And if you're someone that wants to run faster, half the game is just staying injury-free, especially once you start getting faster, once you start running sub-11 and you start running mid to low 10s, half the battle is just staying injury. If you see the fastest guys, the biggest problem is just injuries. They got to just stay injury-free and just compete in fast races. And by doing stuff like this, strengthening the hip flexor, strengthening the hamstrings, we're able to use science-based movements to make sure that you're spending more time at the track versus at a physical therapist office.
Right. That's true. That's true. And you mentioned Johan Blank was, suffering from hip flexor issues, but the fastest man in the world, Usain Bolt, running 9.58, he actually had hamstring issues and hip flexor issues as well. He's known for winning the 2008 Olympics, but that wasn't his first Olympics. He was out there in 2004, suffered a hamstring strain or tear or something because he didn't have that strength. And you can, watch his documentary, and that's what his coach says. His coach says he just had general body weakness. So we had to break him all the way down, built the strength in his hamstring eccentrically. You can literally see him doing the Nordic hamstring curls, the eccentric, lying hamstring curls. So that's major. And then one other thing that you mentioned, you said the velocity-based training, right? So that's the speed of the barbell.
Velocity-based training is a method of programming where rather than using a percentage of your 1 rep max, you use a percentage of your maximum velocity. So depending on how fast you can move the bar with no weight on it, that would be, for example, your maximum velocity for that movement. And then you would program, okay, maybe you do 70% of that or 80% of that or 10%. You would program according to how your velocity decreases versus programming relative to your 1 rep max. And this is one way of training where the benefit of this is that a one rep max is good and training based on that is good for strength, but that doesn't really measure speed versus this measures speed. This form of training, you can measure speed, and you can usually train in like one of two ways. One is you can set a certain speed for the day and say, okay, I want to train, and once I go below this speed with the barbell, with this weight, I know that I'm done for the day. So that way you can manage fatigue levels and make sure you're training at maximum speed relative to that weight. The other way is you could set, okay, I'm gonna pick a certain speed that I want to train at with the bar, and I want to just target that speed. So if you want to work on power, you might want to decrease. You might want to work at 40 to 50% of your maximum speed with that barbell, because when you're training in these ranges is when you're targeting specific adaptations. Like I don't want to get so crazy scientific because we could talk about this for hours, but there's something called a force velocity curve, and the force velocity curve, it basically explains the relationship between load and speed. The heavier the load is, the slower the speed, and the faster the speed, the lower the load, the lower the weight. So depending on where you are across this curve, you're going to be creating a specific adaptation in your body, whether that be more maximum speed, whether that be more maximum strength, or somewhere in between, like maximum power, which it meets in the middle. So using velocity-based training, you can target these different zones, you can manage fatigue levels better, and you can precisely track like how fast you're actually training when you're lifting and training for speed. So that's a whole big topic. But for anyone that's really interested, you can start looking into it. It's called velocity-based training. It's fairly new in terms of the science, but the guys who are like at the top of the top, they've actually known about this for a long time because the science just catches up to stuff that the experts been knowing. So today on the call, we have Wendell talking about this, and he's been using this stuff since like the 70s because he's already been knowing about it. But the science catching up right now in the last like 5-10 years. But that's the benefit of having the science and the experts. You can validate it, and then you can see what's actually being practiced and the different experiments that these experts have already figured out.
Got you. Okay, now you got me wondering, you got me curious. I think we're gonna have to go a little bit deeper into that. Why does it matter how fast I'm moving the barbell as opposed to how much weight? You know, what if I could just load the bar up and be lifting 500 pounds, but I'm gonna be moving very slow, you know? So why does it matter how fast I'm moving?
Great question.
What is that?
So depending on the load, like I said earlier, depending on the load, you're going to be stimulating a different response in your body. You use very heavy weight, you're going to stimulate your body to produce more maximum strength. Your body's going to fire to produce more forces. It doesn't care about how fast it is, it's going to produce it, but it's going to worry about producing more forces. And then if you train with lighter weights and more speed, now your nervous system is going to be, okay, we got to fire faster. Not necessarily more forces, but faster. And depending on what way you use, you're going to stimulate a different response in your body because your body has to respond differently relative to what stress you're putting on it. Not all stress is the same. Different stress, the body is smart. Depending on the stress you put on the body is naturally going to find the most effective way to deal with that stress. So if it's maximum weight, it's going to start triggering, okay, let's get stronger. If it's maximum speed on the barbell, then it's going to start triggering, okay, let's get faster. So that's basically how it would affect it in simplistic terms. Now, if you look at the science behind it, yes, a full program, an athletic program, whether you're training for speed or any other sport, you should be combining all of these methods. You should be getting stronger. You should be getting more powerful. You should be getting faster because the more strong you are, the more force you can produce. Then you can transfer that into speed later on in your season. But you need to fill up that bucket before you start distributing out into your actual sport. You gotta show up with your bucket full. Otherwise, if you just show up to training or if you show up to competition and you want to work on your block starts, but your bucket is empty, your strength is low, it doesn't matter how much technique you work on, your maximum capacity is just low. You need to increase that and then transfer that into your actual skill. So that's one way to put it. In a more in-depth way, if you look at the science, depending on how you train in the gym, your body will respond differently in terms of muscle fibers, in terms of nervous system adaptation, in terms of hypertrophy. If you use heavier weights, generally you're going to build more muscle, but also you're going to build more slow twitch fibers, and then also you're going to be fatiguing your nervous system a lot more. So if you're early in your season, if you're off season, that's fine. You want to possibly maybe put on some muscle. If you're lacking a lot, and if you're like a power-based athlete, you probably want to get stronger. And taxing your nervous system isn't that big of a deal because you're so early on, you're not competing right now. You can tax your nervous system. But now later on, once you're actually competing, now you want to be very careful with how often you're taxing your nervous system. So by doing lighter weights, faster speed on the barbell, not only will that transfer more over to faster running, but now you're not taxing your nervous system as much. So less nervous system fatigue. You're not going to be building as much muscle, and especially if you're already in your peak shape, every pound of muscle you add on, you got to get a percentage faster. So you probably don't want to be adding on too much muscle. And the last most important thing also is faster speeds on the barbell. It's going to produce more of type 2X fibers, which are the fastest fibers that you can have. So obviously, if you want to run faster, you want to have more fast twitch fibers. So depending on how you train, you're going to produce different adaptations. And velocity-based training is just one other method that you can make sure you're targeting exactly what you want to produce and creating the exact response in your body depending on what stress you put upon it.
Wow. Okay. Gotcha. You definitely cleared that up. So now we figured out how to get it to translate over to the track. So if we're moving faster in the gym, does that make our stride rate go up, our stride frequency, our stride length? Like, what is this? How are we faster? How do we get faster, right? Is it about covering more ground? Do I need to be tall and a long, leg span? Or is it literally about, a faster stride
All right.
frequency?
Also, it's a question that I really like because there's always that debate of, is it stride length? Is it stride frequency? How do I actually run faster? And there's many ways we can approach this. From one perspective, we have to take into consideration the athlete. Some guys are what we would call more power based, and some are more bouncy. By power based, I mean they have more strength, so they can get longer stride length. And the other example is someone that's more bouncy, someone that has really bouncy tendons. So when they hit the ground, they bounce off really quick. And some people just have a natural predisposition to this. For example, I have a friend who competed in the Olympics a couple of times. And when he was training at a camp, one thing they told him is that he has a very unique foot because he has very high arches. He has very high arches, and these arches allow him to bounce off the ground really fast. And he's someone that never really had to work on plyometrics, never really had to work too much on his bounce. He was just naturally bouncy, so that was his strength. So for him, he would probably work more on just maximizing the ground contact time and increasing his frequency, versus somebody else like Usain Bolt, for example. He also has incredible bounce as well. But he's someone, because of his long legs, he has great frequency, but also his big advantage is his stride length. His stride length is huge, and because of this, he's able to cover more. He's able to run 100-meter sprints in about 41 strides versus 45 or 44, which is what the average elite sprinter would typically use. So that's the first thing. We consider an athlete's strengths and weaknesses, and rather than trying to obsess too much about their weakness, we want to obviously we want to address their weak points, like in their mechanics, but we want to maximize their strengths, and we want to work towards what their natural inclination is. And then the other side of the spectrum, if we look at the science and we look at just like a general overview of how the fastest races are run, the main determinator of faster sprint speed is going to be putting more force into the ground, which is going to produce longer stride lengths. So if we look at longer stride lengths. So that's
It's not about, as you run,
no,
it's not about opening your legs
yeah,
farther, like some people cast out, and they'll overstride. It's about hitting the ground harder to
exactly. Hitting
propel
the
you
ground
further. That's
harder
what you're saying.
to prepare yourself further. And then some people might say, oh, should I stomp the ground? But no, you don't want to stomp the ground either, because you want to bounce off the ground. You want to just strike the ground. And it's not even something you do consciously too much. Your mechanics should be good so that it happens automatically. But this happens through working on your bounce and through working on vertical forces. The more vertical force you put into the ground, the longer of a stride length you will achieve. There's a guy named Dr. Peter Wayan. He's a PhD researcher, and he has a lab where in his lab he has a $100,000 treadmill where they analyze the forces on the treadmill, and they analyze through video analysis the speed and the frequency and all the numbers of a sprinter's stride. And they've done data where they've analyzed elite sprinters versus sub-elite sprinters. And they'll see that at an elite level or at high speeds, in the beginning, the stride length is about the same. And then as the speed increases, the elite sprinters will be all the way up here in their top speed, and the sub-elite guys will be right here. And the biggest difference is the forces and the stride length of the elite sprinters. And that's the main thing that separates it even more than stride frequency. So if you're someone that wants to run faster, that would be the main thing to focus on, making sure you can increase your vertical forces to put more force into the ground and get a longer stride length naturally. And then obviously, if you're on a 100-meter sprinter or 200-meter, you want to work on your speed endurance, because it's not just about hitting top speed, but it's about maintaining it. Now, on the topic of casting the foot out, I actually had an athlete that had this issue as well. He's an athlete that was running 10.2, and he got an injury. So when I went to analyze his mechanics. One thing that I found, and I actually had some help from a coach named Derek Hansen, who's also a really high level coach. We're able to break down his mechanics and prescribe to him a set of exercises to help him with this problem, because he was actually casting that leg out. He was reaching out too much. And what happens, if anyone that's watching this, if you start casting your foot out or trying to do the claw back, as some people might put it, what happens there is now you're exaggerating the natural movement of your stride, and you're putting more stress on the hamstring. Because like I said earlier, when your leg is extending out to the ground like this, that is when the hamstring is getting stressed out, when your leg is extending. And the more you kick out forward, if you just look at the position, the more forward you kick it, the bigger of a stretch you're putting on your hamstring, and the more stress and the more force you're putting it under. So you increases your risk of injury. And that's exactly what happened with this athlete before I met him. He had this hamstring injury, and once I broke down his mechanics, we realized the reason why this happened is because he was casting his leg out. So for anyone that's doing that, I would highly suggest that you guys address this immediately, because if you haven't gotten an injury from it, there's a good chance that you will, especially once you start running in the mid to low tens. So that's definitely one thing that I would look at for sure.
Yeah, that's major. So if that's something that you're dealing with, it's something that I've dealt with. As I was, I actually had that problem in high school, tearing up my left hamstring, and it kind of just, leaked into everything that I was doing, every other sport that I was playing, even how I was walking. So we think about injuries just on the track, but you don't want to be running wrong and get injured, because then that's just going to be, you'll be limping around all day at work, at school, at, wherever you are. So it is important to learn how to run effectively so that you're not injuring yourself. Now, question about the feet. You said, you gave one example of how the guy had high arches and how that helps. So I want to ask about the reverse. What if you have flat feet? A lot of people tend to think that that's like a permanent condition. It's a disease. I got flat feet. I can't do it. Is there anything that you can do to help the flat feet, for one? And for two, if you don't, do you think that flat feet will hinder your performance? Will that slow you down?
I've actually spoken to this. I've spoken about this with the same physical therapist, physical practitioner who worked with Johan Blake's team. And I asked them the same thing. So does flat feet mean that you're done, or how does that impact your performance? And so the first part is that there's things you can do. There's things that you can do to work on your arch. And in a second, I'll talk about one thing you can do. Now, in terms of does it hinder your performance? Having flat feet, based on this, and the guy that I was talking to, he's consulted with multiple pro athletes in multiple sports, and he said from what he's seen, that it does not hinder you from performing at an elite level. There's guys who have very flat feet. There's examples that you can look up online where they have just really nasty looking feet, and they're still able to perform at a very elite level. Even with flat feet, it's not a hindrance. It just means that it might not be your strength. You might have to focus on something else in terms of your unique advantage.
Got you. Okay. Because I do remember watching Usain Bolt's documentary. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the nicest feet. He in that part, I believe he was about to play soccer. And so they were filming him putting his soccer shoes on. He said, "Hey, man, cameras up, cameras up." But they still caught it. And it blew up online because he does not have high arches. He does not have super strong feet or super nice feet. He's out in Jamaica. They walking everywhere. I couldn't imagine what shoes he was wearing before he got sponsored. So that's major that you actually gave us some things that we could take away to, one, help our feet, and reassure us that if you have flat feet, it's not game over. There are some things that you can do. And there's probably some other things, some other strengths that you have to continue to build on, right? So that you can actually, not get injured. You can continue your career as well. Sure. So that's major. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. But all of this information that we're talking about, if we were in the spring club, we will be getting all of that, right?
Then all this information, you'll basically be getting this pretty much on a daily basis, because inside we're always talking about speed. We're always showing what's working. Maybe we have a guy who's really good at the 200. So he might start sharing, here's what he's doing for his workouts. Here's his strategy, again, the 400. Every month we have the expert coming in. Every week I do a coaching call where I personally host it and I'm personally in there answering questions. And then you can always direct message me and I'll answer questions. We have the video analysis where every month you submit your video, and then we use all the technology that I talked about to analyze exactly what you need to work on and prescribe specific exercises. So all this stuff is pretty much like for some people that are coming on for the first time, they might be learning a bunch of new things. But for us in the Sprint Club, this is a regular everyday thing.
Nice. Okay. What is your mission with the Sprint Club? You're giving out all this is a whole podcast, a straight game. You know, somebody can download this episode and I hope they're taking notes if you watch this live. You're giving all game, you're educating people. Like, why? What does this do for you? Why
like
are you creating that? What's the mission?
Because my mission from the beginning has always been pretty simple. Because I love sprinting so much, and early on I realized how I personally believe it's the most powerful form of exercise in the world. Not only that, but it's the most fun way to train as well. My mission with the Sprint Project, with the Sprint Club, is to make sprinting as fun, easy, and accessible to learn for anyone in the world, no matter where you are, no matter what age, no matter what background, no matter what economic level. You can learn how to use sprinting, how to implement it into your program, the way to make it the most effective as possible for you, and hopefully attract more people to the sport, more people to the training, and make people more excited about what I believe is the most powerful way to train in the world, which is sprinting and sprint training components.
Wow. That's amazing, man. I just want to say thank you for taking a second out of your day to sit down, give us all this game, educate us. You know, you've named exercises that we can do, ways to help the hip flexors, way to help the hamstring, flat feet. You know, this is major. I can't thank you enough, man. I'm a sprinter myself, so I'm taking mental notes. I'm gonna rewatch this episode and make sure, you know, there's some things that I can implement into my program as well. So thank you, man. I really do appreciate you for stopping by and have this conversation with us. I follow you myself. I'm gonna go ahead and join the Sprint Club. So for any of our Trackletics family out there, if these are some of the issues that you're dealing with, flat feet, want to get faster, improve your block start, increase your stride rate, your stride frequency, if you're trying to figure out what to do in the gym, if you just want a community of like-minded athletes that want to get better, if you want to, you know, connect with some old school coaches that have some theories and techniques that aren't just out on YouTube University, you need to be in the Sprint Club, right? So make sure that you're following him. Make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel. Check the website out and get in that Sprint Club. It's major. Thank you again, man.
Thank you for having me on. You're an incredible host. I got to take notes from you. You're super smooth with it. And thank you for having me on your platform. This was a pleasure speaking with you, and hopefully we can do some more in the future.
Definitely. Let's definitely do some more in the future,
Appreciate you, man.
I appreciate it. You have a great day, brother.